but what are some like common misconceptions about, like nearshoring? Are there like concerns about, I'm sure in today's climate, there's a lot of concerns, but like what are some of those misconceptions that you see a
For
lot?
sure. There's definitely a lot of myths and I would love to bust them all.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So I would start with first and foremost, and it kind of goes aligned to that history, is people really think that nearshoring and offshoring is for entry-level roles or very like data entry, monotonous tasks, which is definitely not the case. We even offer manager levels, right? C-level execs that are from Colombia working at a distance for our customers in the US. So I think that right there goes to show it's not necessarily the country itself or the model. I don't think you can kind of generalize it like that. It just depends on what you're looking for. And if you make clear your needs and your expectations from the beginning, then as long as we're leveraging that talent pool correctly, we're still able to find you that high performing senior that has 5 to 10 years under their belt or whatever they would need.
Welcome to the ThinkFreight Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Wording, and it's my pleasure to announce today's guest. It's Mia Mazal from Sworkz. She's in charge of business development and the partnership manager. Mia, welcome to the ThinkFreight Podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks for having me today. I'm super excited.
Absolutely. We've got a lot to cover today. I think that there's a lot of interesting topics going on with nearshoring. So I want to dive right in and kind of, dive into your background and how you made it into the awesome world of freight and logistics. Before we dive into today's show, we want to give a massive thank you to our partners and sponsors. Manifest is the largest global supply chain and logistics tech event in the world, bringing together Fortune 500 global supply chain executives, logistics service providers, cutting-edge startups, venture investors, and technology leaders. Join ThinkFreight and more than 4,500 supply chain innovators in Vegas on February 5th through the 7th, 2024. Now remember, ThinkFreight listeners save $200 off the current price to attend. To learn more and to register, visit manifestvegas.com/ThinkFreight. Now, let's dive back into our episode.
Well, it's definitely a random story. I feel like most people either you are born into it or you somehow just fell into it. And I definitely just fell into it. Knowing the founders from Sworkz previously, they had known a little bit about my work ethic and what drives me, right? So kind of because of that relationship, they kind of opened up the doors for me to explore Sworkz. And by the 4th week of exploring, I completely fell in love and kind of just dropped everything I had going and moved over to Colombia and started working with them. Yeah. And started kind of just submerging myself as much as I could into logistics and the whole industry. And I've been with them ever since. So I'm coming up on 2 years now in the industry.
Wow, that's really cool. So let's dive into that real quick. So you said you kind of like dove into it and then you moved to Colombia. So were you like that's wild. Like how, yeah. So were you working like stateside for a bit and then moved there? How was that process?
Yeah, so born and raised in Delaware, I was finishing up my master's in special education and early education. And so when the kind of offer or the idea came about, I was still focusing on my studies. But I wanted to, kind of plan my life for post grad school, right? So I started working with them more on a part-time, like let me assist as I can. And then once I finished my studies, I was completely full with them, but remote until I had the capacity, meaning had really my visa, to move out to Colombia and just kind of went there blindly. I didn't know anything about Colombia. I didn't know where I was going to be. I had never visited. So it was really a shot in the dark and thankfully it worked out really well. So yeah, I got my visa and that same week I embarked on a plane and took 4 suitcases of all my life belongings. I now have moved out of Colombia. That was last summer. And after being there for a year, the office is kicking and running good enough to the point where they don't need me anymore and they need me elsewhere. So now I'm actually back stateside living in Florida.
Wow, that's really cool. So that you just kind of you could just kind of learn, like you did a little bit with this company and then just said, yeah, I like it. Let's move to Colombia. Like
Exactly.
YOLO, right? Like just just live life. Like that's so cool. Like I think that that's interesting. And like that's kind of like what a lot of people like that I talk to like want to do, right? That's why
Hmm.
they're in logistics, or that's why they found, or they go after their dreams and found companies. But you know, you're in a different position, Mia, and I think that what you know what Sworkz is doing with nearshoring is really interesting. So let's dive into that, because you know it's a very popular a word in the logistics world right
Yeah.
now. So what is nearshoring? I know there's a lot of people who probably see it and are like, "What the heck is this?" So what is it? And let's dive into that.
Yeah, definitely. I see people using nearshoring very differently in the industry. Some people use
Yeah,
nearshoring when they're really just talking about the movement of freight or products or goods to and from Mexico. But when we're
right.
talking about nearshoring, we're talking less about product or freight itself, if not people. So in
Mm,
my word terms, I guess this is definitely not Merriam's dictionary. But nearshoring is really the aspect of working with a partner or provider in another country who helps you with the sourcing of talent and the matching of talents, but also helps you with the management. So that back end of the either contracting or the payroll, providing benefits, those types of things. So it's really
mm.
someone that's allowing you to branch out and access a global talent pool. And besides just accessing the talent pool, leveraging it and adding it to your team. So although maybe your team is all in the States, you now have key players in different countries all across the world.
So how does, I guess, nearshoring differ from offshoring?
Yeah. So, in very simple terms, offshoring is normally based on a different time zone. So, when you're thinking
Mm,
of offshoring, people normally think of India or the Philippines, anything that where, it's nighttime for you, it's daytime for them, and vice versa. So, nearshoring, you can think of it more aligned in terms of time as well as culture. So, Colombians,
okay.
for example, because when I'm talking about S Works, I'm really thinking about Colombia right now. They have a very similar culture in the way that they work, and the things that they care about in their government, for example. Those types of things
Mm,
are closely aligned with the US as opposed to maybe some of those offshore countries. And then the other difference that I would also add in is outsourcing. So, outsourcing is really based
yeah.
around more of a project or a fixed timeline. So let's say you need
Mm,
a website developed. That period might take you 3 months. So you don't know how many people are behind the scenes working on that website, but at the 3 month mark, you're done. But when you're doing nearshoring or offshoring, this isn't a 3 month period. This is your full time employees. So you need to select which kinds of employees or what kind of talent you need on your team to fulfill that project of building the website. So, like, I guess the key difference really would
yeah.
be there is one has more of a fixed time and you're not sure how many people are working for you versus nearshoring or offshoring. You select those employees on your own, and they're also branding or they're representing your
Mm,
brand, right? So they're an employee
absolutely.
just like you might have one in Chattanooga or you have one in the India. It's the same thing.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So let me ask you this: so, how can logistics companies, teams, whether that's actually moving freight, having operations, or building a tech company, how can people utilize nearshoring? And what is it exactly for? Like, can you find from engineers to salespeople to operations, or is it more more like the outsource side where, hey, we're gonna do like websites and things like that? How can logistics teams really expand on nearshoring it and like make it work for them?
For sure. So I think kind of looking back at history might be helpful to answer that question as well. The
Hmm.
pandemic really opened up the doors for nearshoring and offshoring and kind of allowed those types of providers to skyrocket, because the tools or platforms for connecting remote teams expanded exponentially, of course, because of the
Yeah.
pandemic. So in those moments, people were really thinking more of that back office support. So customer service, tracking and tracing, those types of things that aren't necessarily customer facing or requiring high level or high performing talent. It's more of entry level roles. But then as time went on and people started to realize, hey, we're not just accessing, entry level individuals, we're accessing a talent pool And a pool
Mm,
signifies that you have, from juniors to seniors plus. So you can have a huge range. So there's actually a lot more you can offer. So it can be your sales team that's actually talking with your customers and closing deals. It can be your tech team, your engineers and your developers and your programmers, using a variety of different programming or coding languages. It can be your accounting team. It can be your carrier sales. It could literally be marketing, designers. It could be anything, right? So kind of the
that's awesome.
possibilities are endless when we're talking about remote work. But you're obviously going to want to find someone that really knows that industry or that department or that segment that you're in. Because if I can provide any type of talent for any person, then what's kind of the value that I'm adding? It's really nothing. But if I can tell you, hey, I know about this industry, I vetted this person, I know their experience, and I know what that actually means in terms of
Right.
performance, then I can actually find you talent that is going to add to your team and not just blindly say, hey, I think that Mary's going to be helpful. Here's Mary, and you take her and run. It's not going to be
Yeah.
as effective or successful.
I remember when I was a broker, I used to get a lot of companies reaching out, and you could tell whether they were, outsourcing, nearshoring, whatever method they were looking for or method of hiring they were going about. You could really tell who knew the logistics industry and who didn't,
Yeah,
because it's a very niche industry. If you're not in it every day, um a lot of the wording and things that you use is going to sound very normy, very outside world. So
mhm,
it's very interesting that you guys are bringing in, quality and um, logistics trained people, right? So like these individuals are going to know about the freight and logistics industry, and it's not going to take them um, a long time to get up to speed, as if you were hiring someone from, maybe a fresh college graduate who has really no logistics experience.
totally. I was actually talking to one of my fright friends recently, who's actually kind of, teasing me because I go to all these events, but I never actually listen in on the sessions because sadly I don't have the time to. But we
Yeah.
were talking and saying, how can I actually provide value if I don't know your guys' pains? I unfortunately did not start on the, brokerage side or the, logistics coordinator. So I don't know all the pains that you guys have. So I have to
Yeah.
actually go another step, and spend my free time, listening to podcasts like yourselves, listening to webinars, or just engaging in content, as much as I
Hmm.
can, so I can pick up on those key terms and lingos in your pain. So that's something that we also require, our teammates to do. We put them in a training program, and we make sure in that training program that they do have the experience they claim to know, but also spend some time there in honing in on those areas of opportunities, or maybe those things
Mm.
that they aren't so strong in, and making sure they truly do understand, what's going on in the industry. And when we say LTL, what does that mean? When we say OTR, what does that mean? It's very basic, but then also
Yeah.
beyond that, the freight memes that are going on right now all over X, I actually use those daily, and I present it to my team and I say, hey, explain this to me, because if you can't explain it to me, then you're not
That's great.
understanding what our customers are dealing with or what problems they're having. So every day we actually just pick a random meme and we kind of break that down. And I think that's just
That's
kind
so
of one
cool.
example to agree with what you're saying. It's super important that they come with that background experience. And that's something that we're able to provide, to our customers through our nearshoring model.
I love that because it's training, but it's also very hands on, and they get to see, like, okay, this is what brokerages are talking about. This is what shippers are talking about. This is what people are posting and joking about, because
Mm-hmm.
these are the more serious topics. So you can really like help them understand these memes, but also understand what's happening in the industry through meme culture. I think that's really cool because it's not something that like not every business does that, right? Like they have very like, we're going to stick to these very strict principles or these very strict guidelines of how we do things. And I'm sure you guys do that as well, but you also have fun and you allow
For
the
sure.
different methods of learning, because I think that with the younger generation that's coming in, I'm in my 30s, I'm a millennial, but with the younger generations that coming in, like you have to adapt to what and how they like to learn and how it's going to hold their attention span as well as others' attention spans, right?
Totally. I think that's
Yeah.
something that I learned very much in my master's and my bachelor's, working with kids with
Yeah,
special needs. It's not that they don't understand, they just learn differently. So I've been
absolutely.
using that approach, obviously in a different formats, but using it with my colleagues and trying to kind of, understand some people are visual and some people are auditory. So those are just small
Yeah.
differences. If Mary really likes to learn through hearing, then I'm going to send her a podcast. But if Joe really
Mm,
likes to read, then maybe I might send him an article. But also something we had talked about before as well is having it in a digestible format. There's a lot of
absolutely.
information out there. There's a lot of outlets, but all of it, most of it is just very dense, information heavy,
Yeah.
which is great information. But if you're kind of new and you're also on the younger side and your time span might not, or your attention span is a little bit shorter, having it
Yep.
in a more organic way where it's bulleted and there's pictures in the middle of it or funny memes or something of that, and where we can have a conversation about it. I've seen it actually works much better. But in
Yeah.
general, right? Because again, every person is very different, but being able to adapt to them and use those different tools goes a long way.
I completely agree. And I talked to a lot of different individuals in this space because I really feel, I feel connected to it in a way because I have a lot of people that I know in the work in nearshoring, the work in staffing, the work in recruiting. And I think that it's just very like, I think that you have to adapt to the world that's around you, and the world that is around us is really this culture of being online, this culture of memes, and this culture of having fun. You can still be very serious and have fun. So I think
Mhm.
that taking those new approaches is very important. Let's dive into something kind of interesting that I think we both see a lot of, and we were kind of touching on them when we kind of dove into what nearshoring is. But what are some common, maybe myths or misconceptions that really are out there about like nearshoring? Because I know that,
Yeah.
like you said, like there's people that get, nearshoring, offshoring, outsourcing. A lot of those get kind of confused and intertwined. But what are some like common misconceptions about, like nearshoring? Right? Are there like concerns about I'm sure in today's climate there's a lot of concerns, but like what are some of those misconceptions that you see a
For
lot?
sure. There's definitely a lot of myths, and I would love to bust them all.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So I would start with first and foremost, and it kind of goes aligned to that history, is people really think that nearshoring and offshoring is for entry level roles or very like
Mm,
data entry, monotonous tasks, which is definitely not the case. We even offer manager levels, right? C-level execs that are
wow.
from Colombia working at a distance for our customers in the US. So I think that right there goes to show it's not necessarily the country itself or the model. I don't think you can kind of generalize it like that. It just depends on what you're looking for. And if you make clear your needs and your expectations from the beginning, then as long as we're leveraging that talent pool correctly, we're still able to find you that high performing senior that has 5 to 10 years under their belt or whatever they would need. And the second
Yeah.
myth that I would really like to bust is turnover. So a lot of times people
Mm,
think of nearshoring and offshoring, they just say, "Oh, you're a call center, right?" No, I hate that. We are not a call center. So obviously I understand the very general, we can fulfill entry level roles similar to a call center. Absolutely. But a call center is known for its high turnover because they're
yeah.
just fulfilling entry level roles. And we're all humans. We don't want to be in an entry level role for years, right? The idea is to
Exactly.
join a job, get work experience, and grow with that company ideally. So that's something that I think is really important to highlight. Nearshoring and offshoring service providers should be creating growth plans and opportunities for their employees, or the terms we use as collaborators. And
Yeah.
that's going to really help to attack that turnover because you're building that culture of we're investing in them and we're investing in their future, and they can scale with the company they're working with as that company scales, which at the end of the day is a win-win relationship. So I
Yeah.
don't think that people should be fearful that, hey, I'm going to hire somebody and spend all this time training, and then 1 month down the line, they're going to be gone and we have to start from zero. I think that's a myth that if you're working with the right partner who does invest in their collaborators, then that shouldn't be an issue at all. Those would
Yeah.
probably be the two biggest myths that I would want to debunk from the start.
Cool. So let's touch on this. So only your first point was, you can only like find entry level people. I think it's very interesting that you guys like can go that deep is to have like C-suite level executives. Now, can
Yeah.
you hire those individuals on like a full-time, part-time, fractional basis? How does that work?
Yeah. So us specifically, we hire all of our collaborators on a full-time basis because
Cool.
we want them to be dedicated to one account for
Absolutely.
reasons of obviously confidentiality, but secondly, dedication and motivation. Since they're an employee for your company, right? I want
Yeah.
them to live, breathe, eat your values. So if they're, spending their time across different companies, it's very hard for them to, say that Thomas is my guy. But if they're
Yeah.
spending all their day with you, then absolutely, I want them to be promoting you before they even promote Sworkz, ideally.
Mm.
So definitely, that's kind of an approach that we take. Although at the same time, I will say that we are quite flexible. So if part time is something that somebody would want to explore, it is something that is possible. But I would recommend or just kind of reiterate that the laws in Colombia in terms of contracting are quite different from the US. So
Mm.
there are things to keep in mind that with different types of contracts that are affected by different amounts of working hours, there are different things to take into account. But if somebody does have that specific need, we very much work with them and kind of just dive in and clarify that from the beginning just to make sure that we are aligned in terms of, what limitations exist with different types of contracts.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, and I actually want to touch on that a little bit more in just a minute. And I think that that's important because when, especially on the more entry level side, you really want someone to really be able to hone into your
Mhm.
accounts and your business and not be um, flexing between multiple accounts, multiple businesses. So I think that that's very important. I'm glad that like you guys have that approach.
Yeah.
Now, on the second part, in terms of turnover, I know that this is something I hear a lot on LinkedIn, on X, that if you're nearshoring, you're going to have a lot of high turnover. Just kind of like if you offshore to India or to Pakistan or China or wherever, you're going to have a
Mhm.
lot of high turnover. So, like kind of like what you said, you need to invest in these employees, like because they're part of your business, and I think that a lot of people who may have issues with high turnover, it may just need to be like a look in the mirror, right?
Yeah. Totally. I see that all the time. I
Mm,
always say we're very selective with our customers because sometimes the issue is not necessarily us. No offense. Sometimes it is the
yeah,
customer. But seriously,
absolutely.
because you need to take a look internally as to what opportunities are you giving your team. If you're already having high turnover in the States without using a nearshoring service provider, the nearshoring service provider is we're adapting to your culture. So whatever you already
Yeah.
have in place, that's what we're going to end up defaulting on, right? Now, are we there to help consult and maybe kind of identify, hey, maybe we should change this or kind of think of it this in a new way? Absolutely. But that's still going to
Mm,
be an internal decision. We're not going to control anything for you. We're just going to be here to support you. So I've seen that a lot where you see a lot of companies that are hiring fresh out of college and they're hiring, let's say, dispatchers or tracking specialists, which is perfect for a fresh out of college individual. But
yeah.
3 years down the line, that individual doesn't still want to be a tracking specialist. He wants to grow. So if
Yeah,
you're doing
exactly.
or giving those opportunities internally on the state side, and then still opening up those same opportunities to those collaborators you have through a nearshoring provider, then you're not going to have that turnover. But I also don't want to blame it all on the customer. I also
For
think
sure.
the provider itself. There's a lot of nearshoring and offshoring service providers. I know
Mm,
it. It's a very saturated
oh yeah.
market, but we're all quite different. We're quite different in the values that we have. We're quite different in the processes or the service that we offer. So I think that that's also a key part. Spend time in vetting your provider. Make sure it's someone that's aligned with what your aspirations are as well, because then you're going to
Yeah.
have that synergy or that alignment and make sure that you're moving in the same direction, right? If for me, what matters is my collaborators and my customer really cares about money, then there's a mix match there, and you're going to start to see that in the performance of the collaborators or maybe the relationship or the communication, those types of
Definitely.
things.
No, I think that those are very important things to keep in mind because, like you said, like it is a very saturated market. Um, there's, and it comes, it's just like logistics, right? There's a lot of operations that maybe don't have your best interest in mind. It just
Hmm.
comes down to we're a money making operation and that's what we care about. But when it comes down to it, is you have to just figure out the best. the best provider for you, and the best, company that can help consult and really build your company with you, right? Because it's not just, let's hire people, right? It's also about
Yeah,
like, let's stay together long term, and let's build this culture and build this together, because you guys are there for um, that consultant side too, to help and really like advise and help people grow and scale their operations as well.
totally. I think that might even bring up like another myth. We're here to
Please.
help. Obviously, we're here to consult and to support as much as you want us to, but we're not going to run your operations, right? We're going to
Mm,
provide you talent, but that talent is working for you and they're going to report to you. Me being the middleman, I'm not going to tell him, which load to cover because I'm not in your day-to-day process. I'm kind of that fly on the wall that's
yeah.
assisting and making sure that they're completing their tasks, but I don't know the nitty-gritties of the day-to-day. So I think that's a big piece too, because sometimes individuals are under the impression that, hey, I'm just going to start working at Sworkz and they're going to completely manage my operations department for me. And that's not necessarily how that works. So
Yeah.
kind of grounding or clarifying those expectations from the beginning is also going to help to prevent having any issues later down in the relationship.
So you guys heard it. If you need a load covered, you contact Mia directly. She will make sure that load is covered. No, I'm just
Got
kidding.
you.
Um, no, I think I see that a lot too, where like people think that they're just going to like send their operations to a provider and they're going to handle everything. When
Totally.
it comes down to it, like you are still in charge. You're still the business owner. It's still your company. Like if you want to hire like a company to run your operations, you can do that. There's companies
Mm-hmm.
that specialize in that, but that's not really, nearshoring. That's kind of just nearshoring all of your operations or outsourcing all of your operations somewhere else.
Totally.
And that's just not what you guys are doing. It's building like basically just your staff away from site. And
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah. It's preparing you with equipped talent that I know you can plug and
yeah,
play and put into your company specific training program. And then they're going to come out that other side soaring, because that's also another
yeah,
aspect. Although I'm doing a training program with them, I don't know what your company does. You could be
yeah,
using the same TMS system as your neighbor, but you're going to be using it in a very different way. So that's
absolutely.
also something that I kind of want to ground, we'll do the training. Absolutely. This person is going to know the industry but they still need to know how you want them to do it. But that you can
Yeah.
assume or expect that because I'm already giving you talent that's prepared and trained, that training aspect is going to go easily and quickly. And when they come out on the other side, it's going to be very, very quick to bring them on and incorporate them to your team. So it's saving you time. For sure, but it's not gonna be, I'm doing everything for you because that
Yeah.
doesn't need, that's not possible. It's just not possible.
Yeah, it comes down to you'll have agents or people with logistics knowledge, but when it comes down to it, you still have to show them the ropes of your
Mm-hmm.
company, your organization, because everyone, you like you said, everyone, if you're using XYZ TMS, you may be utilizing that way differently than the
Totally.
neighbor or someone else that they've worked for in the past. So it just comes down to train them on your processes, just like you would if you were sitting someone down here in the US right next to you and showing them how to do it. It's really no different. It's
Exactly.
just your people are in different areas. What's something I want to dive into real quick, Mia, is you touched on this was Colombia laws versus some of the US laws. And what I wanted to kind of dive into, you and I've talked about this in the past as well, was this recent TQL ruling and how nearshoring may be impacted by that. Because if you're offshoring, or if you're nearshoring your operations, or hiring people to do a lot of these tasks, you're not being held to U.S. law, but still there are laws in Colombia. So how do some of those laws, I guess, translate or work to the effect of, I guess, for helping companies nearshore their operations if they're trying to, um, I guess, bypass U.S. law?
Yeah. I think that I want to start off prefacing this saying I'm no expert into the TQL ruling, but I have,
Yeah.
taken a look a little bit into what's going on. But to be honest, in my opinion, I don't think it's going to affect very much anything except for bringing more visibility to it.
Mm,
Because now individuals are going to start to question more, what are those differences versus in these moments, when I'm talking to customers, for example, I'm taking on the risk of all the contracting and hiring talent in Colombia. So I actually don't share much about the Colombian laws because part of my value proposition is I'm handling that for you, right? So I
Yeah.
think that this new ruling is just going to encourage more people to say, well, let's know like what's going on. What is the difference between Colombia and the US and what does that mean for me? Now, in simple terms, I would say that it really depends on the contracting type and what you're looking for. So to kind of break it up a little bit, there is defined and undefined contracts in Colombia. And then the last one is called prestación de servicios, which is very much like freelance. So
Gotcha.
having a defined contract is normally used for outsourcing or project based, where it's, hey, I'm going to contract you for 6 months. And at the end of the 6 months, we either renew the contract or that's the end of the relationship. There is undefined contract, meaning that I hire you for no specific amount of time because you are my employee, and the goal is, of course, for you to stay on forever. So there is no, end period or renewal period. It's just continuous. And then the last one being freelancing, that's when you normally see the biggest difference from what I know. I'm not an expert again, but from what I know and what I've understood, that's kind of where the barriers pop up. Because the difference being with the US and with Colombia, when you're contracting a freelancer, you can't actually oblige them to commit to any working hours. So it's more of just working by tasks. So like we can use the website example again. Let's say you hire me as a freelancer through Sworkz, and you need me to do this website. You don't know if I'm working on this website at 1 a.m. or 1 p.m. So that becomes a little bit finicky when you're working with the provider because we're telling you that we are on top of these individuals and we know what they're doing. But if they're a freelancer and I can't get them to commit to a specific amount of time or specific working hours, then I don't have that confidence, right? Into guaranteeing to you that I have full visibility of their day to day. So that's when things become, I would say, a little bit trickier than the US. I don't think, again, the TQL ruling will have a big impact into the model itself. I think if anything, it's just going to encourage those who want to nearshore or currently nearshore just to ask a little bit more in terms of what's going on behind the scenes, just so they can
Yeah.
kind of cover their behinds.
Yeah, I think that as well. I think that some companies will try to push more of their ops for nearshoring instead of having dedicated U.S. employees, because a lot of what the
Yeah.
TQL was about was obviously was employee misclassification and having like brokers not doing specific tasks also relating to basically what their job title was. So I think you'll see some more companies just trying to nearshore their operations so that they can, um, I guess, not have such big U.S. teams doing
Mm-hmm.
that. So let's dive into something a little bit else. We've talked a lot about S-Works and things like that, but how does S-Works directly operate? And then I guess if someone today wanted to hire 10 or 15 people, how can they go about that?
Yeah, totally. So us specifically, we do this process, I would say it's quite simple, and to the point. So we kind of sit down and understand, what you're looking for and what do you care about? Because again, we're going beyond just the job description of you need a
Yeah.
carrier sales, here's a carrier sales individual. No, we want to go, beyond the personality. Do you like blue? Okay, this person likes blue. Perfect. Then that's a good match because those are crucial things, of course. If I don't
Yeah.
like your shirt, then I'm not going to be a good person to work with you, those types of
Right.
things. So that's kind of everything we're honing in on to in that original call. And then more than that, the job description. So if you're
Mm.
telling me I need carrier sales, what does that mean to you? Because again, it's very different than what that means
Yeah.
for your neighbor. So honing that in, so then we can kind of present to you what your investment looks like, drawing that out. And ideally at that point, we're already aligned and we can start that sourcing process for you, sourcing directly for that individual's team. Once the sourcing and the vetting is done, we're investing all that time on your behalf. Then we
Mhm.
present those best match candidates. they get to interview and they actually decide who joins their team. So again, this is their team member. I'm going to give them, here are some superstars that I'm confident in, but you choose which superstar you want on your team. And then just get you connected with your account manager, which is your right hand or those eyes for you, the boots on the ground, as well as our IT teams to configure everything in terms of the workstation and everything needed to really get the job done. And then at that point, you get the wheels rolling onto that on that company specific training process. So it's very straightforward process. In a dream world, in 3 weeks, by that third week, you already have those individuals working on your team. If everything goes according to plan. So it's rather quick. It's about 2 times faster on average than staffing firms in the US. And then it doesn't really matter if you want to start with 1 or if you want to start with 15. I will say that different providers have different limitations or expectations. But for us at Sworkz, we work with companies of all sizes because we are personalized in our approach. So we don't mind if you need to start with 1 person or a couple more. That's totally okay with us as well. We're very flexible in our approach. So if anyone is interested, what I would encourage them to do is either reach out to myself or reach out through our website or through our LinkedIn, and we start that kind of exploration process, make sure that we actually are a good fit and that we can provide value to them. And if so, kind of continue that on to make sure that we're aligned in terms of what everything is included in the value proposal, and kind of take it from there. That would really be the process.
Mia, it sounds like a really, really awesome process. It seems like it's a very, like Sworkz is a very flexible organization for smaller and mid market companies that are
For
really
sure.
looking to help with their operations. I've got one more quick question for you before we wrap up. So you've been to a lot of conferences this year. What has been your favorite conference that you've been to and why?
Ooh, great question. This is a really hard question to answer because I
You've
think
been
that
to
every
so many good
conference,
ones this year.
I know, and everyone is very different. So
Yeah,
can I choose 2?
I'll absolutely let you choose
Okay.
two.
So I'm going to start with first and foremost, Women in Trucking. That to
Yeah,
me was an incredible experience because it was a very different change of pace, being that it was obviously a majority of women there, which is very
yeah,
different from the general event. So being kind of in a different light, it was more about awareness and encouragement. That was it was a great event for
I
me
love that.
personally. And then the other event that I love and I'm super excited for next year is Manifest.
Oh
Manifest
yeah,
is just awesome. I think the energy inside the conference is awesome. I think that there is a huge diversity in terms of who's attending. So it's really a conference that can capture any type of need,
yeah.
whether your approach is selling or whether it's branding awareness or you want to send your marketing team or whoever. I think it's really a catch all. Besides also being in Las Vegas, which is awesome. Um, I think that Manifest has been one of my favorite experiences, and
I
I'm
love
I'm
that.
also kind of biased because it was my very first conference alone.
Oh
So I
wow.
kind of was able to navigate that conference
Yeah,
as much as I wanted to. So those would probably be my 2 for this year that kind of stand out the most.
that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm really happy to hear that. Are you going to be at Manifest again in February?
Yeah, February, right
Awesome. We
before
will
the Super
see.
Bowl.
Yeah, right before the Super Bowl. It's great timing. I talked to it's great that you mentioned that event because I talked to Pam Simon last week, conference
Hmm.
chair, and her and I were talking about just the wide, diverse country representation that Manifest has, and I think that's so amazing because the space is so global, and being able to connect with people from countrywide to worldwide is just absolutely amazing. And I think that that's going to be a top tier event again this year.
Oh, totally. And Manifest is a rather new event. If I'm correct, I
Yeah.
believe next year is their 3rd year. So
Yep.
they've left their mark in the industry, that's for sure. And I'm only expecting them to go up from here. There's
I completely
definitely
agree.
millions of other events that I would love to shout out as well, but I'm not going to, drain all our time. If anybody is interested in hearing about that, please feel free to ask me. I love talking about events.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll have to have you back on sometime. We'll do a whole like events recap. Like what are the best freight events you've been to or something like
Definitely.
that.
I would love to.
Awesome, Mia. I appreciate you coming on. I know you have a very busy schedule. So where can people find you guys? Can find you, and where can they find Sworkz if they're interested in learning more or have some questions?
Totally. So you can go to sworksgroup.com, Sworkz with a Z at the end, and check out our website. And there are multiple avenues there to connect with us. Or you can check out our LinkedIn page also at Sworkz, or myself on LinkedIn at Mia Mazal. And now I am on the X community. So you can also find me there, also at Mia Mazal, or any of my teammates as well. We'd be more than happy to connect with you and explore.
Awesome. I'll have all of Mia's links and Sworkz links in the show notes or in the comments. If you guys like today's podcast, make sure you guys give it a like and review. And don't forget to check out our newsletters that drop on Monday and Wednesday at thinkfreight.io. And we'll catch you guys in the next podcast. Thanks, Mia.
Thanks, Thomas.